Polymer clay is a super fun medium to use and so versatile. Hi, my name is Leslie and welcome to Happy Tuesday, where we do crafts and DIY and home decor and more. Today I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks and hacks about using polymer clay, along with 5 super cute projects. Now, don't forget to stick around until the very end and I'll have a hint for you on one of next week's projects. So, let's get started.
And here's a quick preview into the 5 projects that we're going to be working on today. Now, getting started, we're going to talk about brand of clay, conditioning, how polymer clay is not food safe, and you want to use dedicated tools. Speaking of tools, we're going to need something to roll with, something to cut with, something for texture, and something to smooth out. And then we're going to talk about our work surface. So here is project number 1. I just love this cute little bookmark. And look how nicely it stands tall in this book. So for our work surface here, I just have a piece of glass from a shadow box, I believe it was, covered in some wax paper, and I taped the wax paper down so that it's not moving around. And then I just bought this little sample pack of polymer clay off of Amazon. I believe it was a Ciro brand, and I'll list it below or link it below. I just found a cheap brand. I didn't know if I was going to enjoy this or not, but let me tell you, it's addicting. Polymer clay is addicting. So when you choose your work surface, you don't want anything too porous. You don't want to use really wood on these projects because the wood will break down the chemical composition of the clay. So you want to make sure and have a smooth work surface and something that you can easily move around the clay with your rolling pin or whatever you're going to use to roll. Now, I actually bought this acrylic rolling pin at Michael's. I had a 50% off coupon and a $5 off, so it was $0. But if you don't want to invest in a rolling pin, because you want to make sure that all your tools that you use with polymer clay are dedicated tools to polymer clay. You don't want to use them with any food products or anything like that afterwards. Now, if you don't want to go changing out wax paper with every color choice you make, because you want to clean your surface so that you don't move this color onto the next color, then you can use like a plain flat ceramic tile, or you could have just used the plain glass. I just didn't want the glare off the lights that I use to light my work surface. This second item that I'm currently using right now, this little cutter, I also bought at Michael's and it was only a couple of bucks. But you could use a table knife, or if you'll see over to the left there, I have this little 5-piece tool set that I bought at Dollar Tree. 5 tools for $1.25, and it does come with a little knife that works pretty well. This particular one that I'm working with, though, also does, kind of roundish shapes as well, so it doesn't just do straight lines. And I don't know if I've told you this before, but I can't cut a straight line with a ruler. So now I am taking one of my Dollar Tree Cricut tools, the weeder, and I'm using it as kind of a little blade to make my little book edges and the page edges. And this will be totally dedicated to polymer clay. Now, if you don't have something like this, you could use a toothpick. As long as the wood isn't in constant contact with the polymer clay, then it won't change the chemical composition. And speaking of chemical composition, you also don't want to add any water at any time to your polymer clay, because that will ruin it until after it's all baked, and then you can do whatever you want. Now, that was a little smoothing tool that I bought at Dollar Tree. So you would have all 4 items that you need: something to smooth with, something to cut with, something to roll with, and oh, no, I guess there's not a rolling in that Dollar Tree thing, but you could use a glass if you wanted. And here is my little Clay book after I have baked it, and it is very stiff, so it's not moving around, and that paper clip is really stuck in there, so it's not coming out either. This would make a really cute graduation gift for all those avid book readers, or a gift for mom even. I just think it is so adorable. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. And here we are with project number 2. I love my little plant stick gnome. So what I'm going to show you here is how to mix colors. If you don't have the color that you're looking for in your package of clay, it's really easy to mix the colors. And as I'm mixing this, I'm also doing what's called conditioning my clay. So conditioning means that you're making it soft enough to work with, especially if it comes out crumbly, but not too soft. So that's one of the really important things about polymer clay is you want to make sure that you condition it well. Now you're essentially just adding heat from your hands or from molding it with that rolling pin there to make it more malleable and workable, and then it will be that workable until you bake it. So in hindsight, I probably should have added a lot less black and a little more white to get the color that I wanted, but I made my gray, and I could have stopped at any time and it would have had more of a marbling look instead of a gray look, which is kind of a cool technique. So I am just creating my little gnome hat, and I'm smoothing out all the edges. Now, something else that we will talk about later is how to take out fingerprints. But for right now, we're just smoothing the edges and getting that hat to the right size. And I just love that little cutter. And the cool thing is you can take that silicone piece that's on the top and you can put it around the blade for storage. And that way you're not at risk for hurting yourself. Now here I am using a little popsicle stick. Again, you can put wood in contact with it, but not for long periods of time until after it's baked. Otherwise, you change the chemical composition, which we've already talked about. Now, some other things that you can use for tools, maybe some tissue paper or brown paper that you've rolled up in a ball. You could use some aluminum foil that you've rolled up in a ball. Those things will all add texture. I believe I said you could use a glass as a rolling pin. You just want to make sure that it's a round glass that you'll then dedicate to polymer clay. And here's one of the little cutting tools. It also has a little texture end on it. And I'm going to use this to create my little gnome beard. And I'm putting some texture in there. And then as I trim the beard up, I'm going to show you a little technique with this cutter. See it? You can kind of bend it and make your cuts a little more round and less straight. And I really love that about this tool. But you can start working with polymer clay very cheaply because you can use lots of household items as tools and or things that you already have in your craft room without having to spend money, and then just buy a sample pack of colors. I believe the one that I bought off Amazon was only $6 or $7 for 24 different colors, which I thought was really cool. Now, one of the things that you want to make sure that you keep in mind is polymer clay very easily picks up lint and other debris, so it's important to keep your work surface and store your clay well. So I used a little bit of that tan color and I made him a nose, and now I'm going to take some of this green and I'm going to make a few leaves because I'm going to put a rose on his little hat since he is a plant gnome. And so I just played around with my little utility knife. I bought that in a set with several different blades, also at Dollar Tree. So that was a useful tool in this video. And again, not a very expensive tool. So I made 3 or 4 leaves, and then I started working with some petals. Now this tool that I'm using right here is a little round kind of flattener, and that came in that pack of 5 or 6 tools it was from Dollar Tree. and I am rolling up those little petals onto my rose until I get the rose the size and the shape that I want it. And then I'm going to add it onto the gnome and add on the leaves, and I'm going to kind of press those in so they stick really well. And polymer clay does stick nicely to itself. And then I'm going to pop my stick back in there so you can kind of see how it will look when it is dried. And here it is, all complete. Now the white that I was using actually had glitter in it, and so you'll see a little bit of sparkle in the gnome hat and his gnome beard, and it just looks adorable in that plant. And here we are with project number 3. I'm obsessed with this little cherry pie. So you're going to start with a bottle cap and make sure you remove all the plastic pieces from the center. And then I took some of that tan clay and I am going to roll it out to make my pie crust. And once I get the pie crust all set in my little pie plate, then I'll secure it all down, and I'll use the remainder to make my little lattice pieces for my pie. Now, some other tips and tricks that we haven't talked about, and we did briefly set on cleaning after every color. You'll notice in one of the projects later that I actually was rolling out white and then rolled out blue, and the blue picked up some of the white off of my wax paper. A really cool tip, if you are using a rolling pin or like in my case, this acrylic rolling pin, if you put wax paper over top of your clay, then it won't stick to the rolling pin. But I didn't do that. I didn't want to add one more piece of something in my little project here. So I've got all my little lattice pieces, and now I'm going to take some reddish clay and I'm going to start rolling out. Now you'll see that clay was kind of crumbly, and no worries, conditioning it either with your hands or a rolling pin, or you'll see some of the more professional people using pasta rollers. I'm not going to invest in a pasta roller when you can do the same thing with all your other tools. But you condition that clay really well and give it that warmth. Another way to warm it would be to take a warming pad of some sort, or you could put a dry towel in the microwave and kind of get it warm, or maybe like those rice bag warmers or whatever, and set it on top of your clay for about 30 seconds, and that'll help warm it up too. But I'm just going to cut little pieces and roll little cherry balls to go into my pie. And until I get the number of cherries in there, you can see I did a lot. I just sat there watching TV and popping out little cherries. So now I'm going to work on my lattice work. Now, if you've never done lattice work on a pie, it's kind of a crisscross design. So I'm going to set my 3 pieces down, and then I'm going to pick one up, and that way you have one going over, one going under, and you'll do that over-under design. And then on the next one, it's going to be the opposite. Wherever it was over before, it'll be under now, and wherever it was under, then it would be over until you get all your pieces on there. And then I just used my fingers and rubbed them up against the edge of that little pie plate bottle cap and took the extra pieces off, and this project is ready to be baked. Now, as we talk about baking, a couple of things you want to keep in mind. Now, this was baked and it didn't have the brownish color I was looking for, so I used an alcohol paint marker and alcohol-based paint marker, and you can see after I've painted that on, you can't wipe it off. But I'm using a blending tool to kind of blend that out and give it more the baked appearance. So here it is, all complete, and I just love the way it looks. But when you're baking it, you want to follow whatever directions are on your particular brand of clay. They run from 230 degrees to 275 degrees. And you want to make sure that, and we're also going to talk about some finishes here. This is project number 4. And this bookmark is another super cute, easy, this could be very saleable project to work on. So we're going to cut the bookmark shape and then we're going to grab a napkin. Anyway, back to baking. You don't want it at too high of a temperature because your clay will burn. So you want to kind of know your oven, where it gets hottest and where it's coolest. And you also want to check with an oven thermometer. I know my oven doesn't run the right temperature based on the degrees I set it at. So you want to make sure that you have it at the proper degrees. Again, because if it's too high, then you will burn your clay. However, as far as the length of time, there's all kinds of things. And here I am, I'm going to take off the bottom two layers. This is a napkin I bought at Pier 1 when they were going out of business. And so it was a 3-ply. Lots of ones that you buy now, though, don't have the 3-ply. They only have the 2. And then I'm going to cut it down to the size of my bookmark. Anyway, back to time of baking. There's all kinds of things people will say. Flip it over, make sure your color is face down or your napkin is face down on your piece of clay, and then you're going to burnish it out. I took a piece of parchment paper to make sure that it was smooth and all rubbed in there. Anyway, back to temperature or time. You can leave it in there longer. You just want to make sure that it is kind of in the middle of your oven, and the longer you leave it, the harder the clay gets, and so the more sturdy it's going to be. Although with this bookmarker, because the clay is so thin, it will still be bendable once it's baked. Anyway, when you're baking it, don't be alarmed, but this clay does get off a slight odor, so make sure that you're well ventilated wherever your oven is, and turn on your ceiling fans or your exhaust fan. That way you can help take some of that out. Now, the last thing about baking is the pan that you use. You want to make sure, especially if you have raw clay that isn't covered, in this case it's going to be covered with a napkin, but if it isn't covered, if you use a shiny pan, your clay will pick up that shininess. Again, I'm going to flip the napkin over so that the clay is in contact with the ink side of this napkin, and I'm going to trim off some of these edges I don't need, and I will burnish it down. And had I done this or had I paid attention to this, I would have ironed that little wrinkle out because it does show up in my clay later. But you want to make sure that you put some type of protection over your pan. So I used parchment paper, and I forgot to cut my hole, so I'm going to peel it back and use a straw and cut my little hole in my bookmark, and then burnish it back up. And once it's baked, you are going to stick this bookmark in a little pan of water for about 30 minutes, and then you'll just rub the excess paper off, either with your hands, or I'm going to go in there with a washcloth and use that roughness of the terry cloth on the washcloth to help get rid of some of that paper. And the color is essentially stained into this bookmark. It's amazing. Anyway, protect your pan. I use parchment paper, or you could use like a tinfoil pan and use wax paper or something in the bottom of it, or those silicone mats. Again, make sure that anything you use is then going to be dedicated to using your polymer clay with it. And if you want to minimize the amount of smell while it's in the oven, you can use like a tinfoil pan and cover over top of your projects, and that'll really minimize the smell. Now I'm going to take a little coordinating ribbon here, and I'm going to run it through that hole and loop it through and pull the loops through, and then I'm going to dovetail my edges and give them a quick burn with a lighter so that they're sealed and not going to fray, and this project is complete. Now I also had some things about finishing. Polymer clay is by itself very waterproof, probably more than the finishes you're going to put on there. But if you do paint your polymer clay after it's baked, then you might want to, and here's some miscellaneous things we're going to talk about through project number 5. But anyway, if you're going to paint your project, you will want to use a water-based sealer, so like a polyurethane that's water-based. But you can paint it or color it like I use those alcohol markers. You can do any of that with the clay afterwards. Okay, on project number 5, we are going to start with a flesh color that I made mixing a couple of colors together, and this is going to be my little girl's head, and I'm just smoothing it out and making sure that it is nice and secure. Now this coffee cup came from Dollar Tree and it's not terribly shiny, but another tip is that if you have a very shiny surface, sometimes the clay won't stick to it once it's baked, and you can come back in with some glue. Now you want something that's going to be a little flexible, maybe a Flex Seal or something like that, E6000, something along those lines to glue your projects together. And the last thing we want to talk about as we finish up these projects is, how do you store your clay? Now, you don't want to put it in plastic containers or anything real porous, because that will change the chemical composition. But like a good little Ziploc bag, and you want to make sure that it's stored in a cool, dark place, and that helps keep your clay ready for the next time that you're going to use it. Now you can use whatever colors you want for her head and arms and face and legs and neck and hands, whatnot. But I chose this color that I mixed, and then I am using the white for her shirt, and will also be used for her little skirt. And now I'm making some little legs, so we're going to create the base of our girl, which brings us to another tip or trick. If you are making a sculpture type thing with the polymer clay, then sometimes you want to build your sculpture out of, wire and aluminum foil and whatnot, because that will help save your clay for the outside of your project. And when it bakes all together, then it will be a wonderfully solid piece. Another thing that we're going to talk about here is making sure that if you get fingerprints on your project, how to get them off. Now, I used through my video just the little smoothing tool to kind of take the fingerprints out, but you can also use, say, like a Q-tip and some isopropyl alcohol, and you gently put a little bit of alcohol on the Q-tip, and you rub the fingerprints right off. Something else that we're going to talk about is fixing cracks. Now, let's say that I bake this and a couple of days from now it starts getting a little crack in it. You can take some more of that same color that you used when you made it originally and kind of fill in the cracks and smooth it out, and then rebake it. Yes, polymer clay can be rebaked multiple times, or you can use some like epoxy type glue and fill it in, and then sand off any of the edges. And that answers another question. Yes, you can sand and drill your projects as you need to. Once that clay is baked, it is very hard and sturdy, so you are able to do all those things. So now we're working on our little arms and her hands, and then the next thing we're going to start working on is her skirt. And I can't impress upon you enough that your clay project will be much more successful if you condition your clay. So here you can see I'm just kind of tossing it back and forth and squishing it out. And let me tell you, this is great stress relief. And maybe that's why it is so addicting to design things with polymer clay. And I really enjoy working with it. You know, you really get to be creative, and it's kind of cool to watch, you know, a sculpture or a piece come to life right before your very eyes. So I'm continuing to condition my piece as I am stretching it out to the size that I want to make the little girl's skirt. And I will trim off the top and angle the sides a little bit and trim off the bottom, which I probably should have trimmed a little bit more off the bottom. The skirt came out a little bit longer than I wanted it to, so I did go back in later and shorten it. But I'm going to take some of these extra pieces and I'm going to make a little crinoline slip for underneath her skirt and add that onto her shirt and give her skirt a little bit more dimension. But before I actually form the skirt, I'm going to give it some little blue detail, kind of like a little sailor skirt. And I am just going to roll out my clay so that it is thin as I need it. And then I'm going to flatten it and then cut off the excess edges. But you can see if you look real close, where I'm rolling out the blue, it has picked up a little bit of that white from her skirt. So that's the importance of changing colors. For this particular project, it didn't really matter. It was okay to have a little bit of white in this little detail piece on her skirt. So I didn't bother with, you know, going in and cleaning the surface and starting over again. But if you don't want your colors to blend together or pick up a different color, then, you know, make sure that you either clean your tile or replace your wax paper or clean off your silicone mat, whatever it is that you're using to work on, before you add the next color. So it doesn't matter even if it's a dark color or even if it's a colored color. Oops, that was a little cherry from earlier. You want to make sure and you clean your work surface. So we are going to now just add in all the details that will finish her. So you can see that I can kind of stretch this clay out, and I love that about polymer clay. I've used a couple other different kinds of air dry clays, and I enjoy working with them, but I really enjoyed working with the polymer clay. I love the way it is so forgiving, and you know, as long as you have your piece conditioned properly, you can just design so many things out of it. And I am looking forward to, after I made that little pie, making some little miniatures for, you know, the upcoming fall and Christmas holidays. Really excited about that. So I am using my little smoothing tool, and I'm kind of smoothing out the edges and making sure that everything is stuck really well to this mug. Now earlier I told you that you needed to dedicate pieces to polymer clay. Polymer clay isn't toxic to work with, but it is toxic to eat off of. So that's why I put the girl on the back side of the mug, so that, you know, if somebody were actually going to use this, and you can, is you just need to hand wash it and gently clean the polymer clay pieces. Here I'm making little triangles with the blue and the white to complete her shirt, and I will put those on as kind of like a little, you know, pinafore kind of type of skirt. So we've got that on the top there, and I actually put them on upside down, so now I'm going to fix them and make sure they are secure to the girl, and then I'm going to start working on her belt. And so I just took a dark clay piece, a dark tan piece, and I made a little snake and wrapped it around itself to give it kind of that corded braidy kind of look, and added that around. And then I finished off her belt, which I did off camera, and now I'm going to work on her shoes and the little socks that come over her shoes, and you know, really start adding in the details. So to make her little socks, I just took little snakes of the white and the blue and layered them on top of each other, and then flattened them out. And then I am going to give it another roll so that it's as flat and as thin as I need it to be for her socks. And we will cut this in half and start putting her socks on. Now I could have made them a little slouchier if I'd wanted to, but I'm making them kind of more looking like boots, I guess. And I'm going to make some little ties for the side. The other thing I love about working with polymer clay is you can make tiniest little details out of it that are more difficult with the different air clays. So I am just going to get that little tie on her little boot there. And this is another Cricut tool from Dollar Tree. And I poked out some little eye holes and then added some eyes, and now I'm adding a color to her head so that when I start adding her hair, if I miss any places, her whole head is covered. And then I will add in the hair. Now I just made long strings, but don't make my mistake. I added the hair from the front going backwards, and it should have been from the back going forwards. So make sure that when you put the hair on, you go from the back moving forward. So I'm going to take these little balls and I'm going to roll out little snakes until I get them the length of the hair I want. And then I'm going to start designing some hair here for her. And I just kind of left it all free flowing, tried not to let it stick to anything so that we can play with it later and make it look like we need it to. And here's where I've realized, oops, I should have put the clay on back to front instead of front to back. So I'm going to add in some back pieces and kind of fill in around her neck on both sides and give her hair just a little bit of a curl. And then I'm going to take some of that leftover piece that you see up there in the right hand corner of the blend that we made her sock boots with, and we're going to make a bow out of that for her hair so that it all kind of ties together, and that way we're not wasting any clay. And that's the other cool thing I love about working with the polymer clay is, you know, it's not drying out as I'm using it. It will stay in this soft stage until it gets baked. And so you have a lot more time to work with a project than you do with many of the air clays. So, you know, it's just a lot more forgiving. And if you mess up or something, you can pull it off and recondition it and start over. Now, if your clay gets too soft because you've played with it too much, there you can, kind of set it aside and it will get a certain firmness back to it once it cools off from the heat from your hands. The other thing that you can do is just throw it in the freezer for about 10 minutes and that'll harden it back up so that you can work with it again. So here I am filling in the other side of her hair, and then I tried to use this little tool from my Dollar Tree supplies to make kind of a little curl, and added little curls to the little pieces and then piled them on top of each other, making sure that they were nice and secure so that when I bake this, those aren't going to crack and fall off. And here I'm going to take some of that extra material, and I was going to try a couple of different things and ended up just turning it into a little bow and adding some little tails on my bow and adding that to the top of her hair instead of trying to make it look like a little ponytail holder thing. So we're just going to add it up there and take another little piece and make it into a little snake. Something else to be aware of is that polymer clay will not shrink when you bake it, and it also does not lose its color. It stays the vibrant color that it is when you bake it. And so here she is all done, and here she is after I've baked her. And you'll notice she's got a kind of little brown tingy on her dress just a little bit, and that's because she was a little too close to the top of the oven. So you want to make sure that you've got your pieces in the middle of the oven. Here's another quick look at this week's projects. Let me know in the comments below which was your favorite and which one do you want to make first.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really did enjoy our time together. Now, since you stuck around till the very end, I have a hint on one of next week's projects. Wait for it. I'll need you to start collecting some of those twigs and sticks that have fallen off your trees, and we are going to make some really cute rustic decor next week. But until then, make it a great day and happy Tuesday!